Man, some part of me always wants to clean on podcasting day. It's like some part of me just says, I can't live like this anymore, and actually kicks into gear and gets my butt cleaning. Hi, I'm Chanel. I'm a recent college grad, living, knitting, spinning, and designing in New Jersey. Welcome to every viewer, new and returning. If you're new, hi, welcome. Hope you like it and I don't weird you out. Returning, you're used to my weirdness, so stick with it. So this is episode 26 of the Pipernell podcast, which is my little ranty podcast. So on the social media, you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry, Facebook, Patreon, everywhere, usually everywhere that matters as Pipernell, Pipernell. Some places you might have to search it with the space, like on my Facebook page and Patreon. But besides that, I am pretty easy to find and consistently across social media. So overview of what I have today. So some news, then some knitting stories, personal knitting projects, then commissions, some spinning. I do have acquisitions and on my radar and life updates. So I got like everything this episode and I got everything going on. So let's get right to it. So news, quite a lot of announcements, I guess, for this section. Quickly, the Pancake and Lulu giveaway. I don't have the things with me. If you want to see them, go back to the past couple of episodes or to the giveaway thread in the Ravelry group. By the way, there is a Ravelry group. I'm always so bad about mentioning it. It's called the Pipernell Podcast on Ravelry. And yeah, it's been getting more active, which I'm so happy about. The giveaway is for a set of stitch markers from a local maker to me, Pancake and Lulu. And I'll be drawing for the winner next episode, which I'll film sometime at the beginning of August. And that was not beginning of August, beginning of July. And that was the June giveaway. And I'll be doing a monthly giveaway for July too, and so on, because of Patreon funds, which have generously made this possible. All right, next we have the spindle along running, and I'm actually going to extend the spindle along to August 16th, giving you an extra month. I'm still going to do a prize drawing. I have some fiber coming in. I'm still going to do a prize drawing on July 16th, which was the original end date, which also happens to be my birthday. I'll be pretty busy that weekend. Hopefully I will have time to actually draw. Maybe I'll film it too. And then, speaking of July 16th, I will actually be teaching a workshop then at Frame and Fiber, which is both a framing and a yarn store in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. Paige, the owner, has invited me to bring my 2 at a time sock class to her shop, and I'm so excited. So if you're interested in learning how to make socks 2 at a time, I would check out her website, frameandfiber.com, and email her, see if there's a spot left, and yeah, go for it. It's going to be so exciting. It's going to be fun. I really enjoyed teaching the class to my knitting group, and I'm so excited to teach it again. So next, I'm just going to do a quick kind of video digest of what has happened with my channel between last episode and this episode. So sometimes I put out content outside of podcast episodes, and this happens to be a couple of weeks where I did put out quite a lot of stuff. So I have a couple of videos that I shot with Mars of Brownberry Chronicles about our spinning and dyeing fiber collaboration, handspun yarn. We called it Sister Strands. She kind of came up with that name on the spot, and it stuck so well. Where we split some fiber down the middle, and she's going to dye her half first in braids and send it to me, which she already did. And then I would spin my half first, then send it to her to dye. And I'll have a little update on that in there. We had a kind of check-in video where we discussed our progress so far, and she had also sent me some process videos of her dyeing the braids, which was really interesting, so definitely go check out those videos. And then the next thing, non-podcast thing that happened, so and maybe I'll just call this bonus content or something. I was able to interview two of my friends who went to TNNA, the National Needle Arts Association show in Columbus, Ohio. And I interviewed Amanda and Vandy, my two friends who are starting a yarn shop, which is really exciting. So, yeah, go check out that interview with them. It was super fun. It was just really chatty. So, yeah, watch those videos out if you want more content outside of the podcast. Yeah. And last thing is I'm about to start the test knit for the Garden State hat, which I showed last episode. It is a lacy, slouchy beanie, but it is pretty adjustable, so I'm going to be posting details in the Ravelry group, but if you're interested, feel free to just comment, message me on Instagram or Ravelry to just make sure that I remind you about the test knit and I'm able to get you in. And for my test knits, as I learned from my last test knit with the Pops and Pins socks, I do need to require more for my test knitters. A lot of people did not get back to me about my Pops and Pins socks. They didn't really provide me any feedback. I didn't pick and choose my testers. I just kind of took whoever came in. And what I realized was a lot of those people were just there for a free pattern. And I'm sorry, but if you're test knitting for me, I do need useful feedback from you. And I will also be adding on the requirements in order to get the free copy of the pattern. At the end on Ravelry, you do need to link your project page and provide high quality pictures of it on to the pattern page when it is published. That way, people who are looking at the pattern it will make it more attractive to people who might buy the pattern. And yeah, so it does actually help me out more. Test knitting is very useful for me as someone who is, as a designer who has not yet been able to afford a tech editor. But if you're just along for the free pattern, I'm going to have to ask you to do a little more work to put in your part. Anyway, so I'm aiming to release this hat pattern in late July or early August, so I need to start that test knit ASAP. Okay, that was news. So on to knitting stories. These are personal projects of mine that I really do need to put in more work on. I'll talk about that in the commission knitting section, but I do need to do a better job of balancing knitting for me and knitting for others, or making in general for me versus for not me. So this, I'm going to call this a mofo, a mostly finished object, because last time it was a hoe. I finished one of these socks and I'm mostly done with the second one. So these are my flat socks. Well, what I'm calling them the flat socks. The pattern is actually Green Leaves of Summer by Alice Curtis, which is from her book Knit Your Socks on Straight. I did a book review of that last episode, so if you're interested in that, check out last episode. And the yarn that I'm using, which I love, it's self-patterning yarn. It's the Regia, Arne and Carlos design line in one of the colorways. I don't know if they named the colorways for the design line. And I'm using US 1 Chaogu red lace 40-inch circulars for this. According to the book and according to this technique, you might notice it looks a little different from most socks that you've probably seen. It is meant to be, well, the reason for this sock construction is so you can knit it on straight needles and you don't have to knit stuff in the round. I know that's difficult for some people, but I don't actually have any straight needles, especially in sock sizes, so I'm just using my usual circular needles. And I alternate between these needles and my other Chaogu US 1s, but those are their knit red, the non-lace line, and this is the lace line. I noticed I think I've talked about this before, but the non-lace needles have a bend, which I guess is supposed to make it more ergonomic. And then the lace tips are noticeably pointier. I haven't tried Hayas. They don't sound as sharp as that. I haven't punctured my fingers. but I've definitely like gotten them caught under a nail or something and just had that spot sore for a while. So yeah, I've really been enjoying this sock. I have tried on this sock a couple of times by now just to make sure the fit's right, and I'm trying to make the second sock match. So I started in this red and blue self-patterning section, and I made sure to cast on with about halfway through that section like I did with the first sock. And so far, I think they match pretty well. Yeah, I think the heel is like off by one row, but that's fine. And my tension seems to be pretty much the same in both socks. So I'm almost ready to start. I think I am on the row where I should start the toe. Because if you look here, the toe, I start decreasing for the toe just right about after this blue and white speckled section ends in the first sock. So I think I should start it in the second sock too. I might count the rows that I've put in on each sock just to make sure after the gusset. So I talked about, I guess last episode when I was reviewing the book, I talked a little bit about the construction, but because I had already seamed up the sock after knitting it flat, you weren't really able to see kind of how it transforms after you seam it up. So you do cast on, these are cuff down, you cast on at the cuff, and you basically, you knit a little stockinette panel, and then the heel, which is pretty intuitive if you've done a heel flap and gusset before. And for me, it was joining the stitches back up that you had placed on the holder. You can't just set aside half the stitches like you do when you're knitting in the round. And then the gusset, you just have to remember where to decrease. The book suggests putting in markers at certain places. I didn't. I was just able to read my knitting and decrease where I needed to. And then you knit flat again, back and forth in stockinette for the foot. So the magic happens when you take this flat piece of knitting, you fold it in half, edge to edge, and you seam it. So you see how that seam turns something that doesn't quite look like a sock into something that definitely looks like a sock. Yeah. That's almost done. I'll probably finish it today after I'm done recording. And those are my flat socks. So my next knitting story is a whip that I actually haven't put in any stitches on this week so far. I really need to get back to it. I don't know why, I just haven't been feeling it. So I'm working on a cabled cardigan for me, and I'm calling it my mask cardigan. I talked about my kind of non-binary, kind of androgynous cardigans in episode 22. I want to create a set of androgynous cardigans, one that's more on the feminine side, one that's more on the masculine side, and just kind of embodies my androgynous style and covers the spectrum of my style, kind of. So this is a pattern by Stacy Girdman called Migration. It is cabled. It's bottom up, knit in pieces, and I really like the cable pattern so far. It's a pretty short stitch repeat. It's a pretty short repeat in terms of row, and it's pretty intuitive. Once you have the setup, you just know where the cables should go and where the textured panels should go. She gives really thorough instructions for where to put stitch markers to help yourself out. These stitch markers, the eyeball ones, are actually by Critium Handmade, by my friend SS. She makes stitch markers, she makes project bags. I collaborated with her on the shawl pattern. She's just overall a very lovely person to work with, and I'm so happy with these stitch markers. They're a nice weight. If this was a lighter weight project, I probably would not use them, but they complement the weight of the project really well, and it's just feels really sturdy. Look, eyeballs. The yarn is Bartlett Yarns 2-ply, so it's 100% non-superwash wool in the colorway Sandstone. I learned from the person that I bought this yarn from, she was destashing it, and she's in my knitting group. Recently, she brought more of that yarn to a knitting group meeting because she had even more sweater quantities to destash. She told me that this is yarn that's spun with one of the oldest styles of spinning yarn. This Bartlett Yarns has the last working spinning mule in the United States, and that's what they spin their yarn on, which is super cool. I'm blaming Ellie of Scandier Knits for turning me on to more rustic yarns and stuff. You just can't resist it when you listen to her podcast. And the needles I'm using, wait, let me show you the swatch. This swatch is blocked lightly with pins and washed, and the cable did grow a bit, and the yarn definitely did soften up. However, because of the growth, it is bigger than the gauge I need. So I knit the swatch on US 8 needles, and I'm knitting the actual sweater on US 7 needles, and I basically sized down one size from each of the recommended needle sizes. I think the yarn I'm using might also be a little bit heavier than what the pattern recommends. I think the pattern recommends Brooklyn tweed, whichever Aran weight yarn they have. Which Brooklyn tweed yarns are woolen spun, so they tend to be very squishy and airy. So when you knit them up, they squish down. This is a very dense, round yarn. So the fabric is going to have, more wool in it and less air. So I needed to size down, which is going to make a really dense, nice, warm fabric. I'm hoping to finish this before Rhinebeck. This might be my Rhinebeck sweater. I need to knit on this. That's all I have for the mask cardigan. I don't have the yardage off the top of my head. But yeah. So, cardigan in progress. And my last knitting story is a kind of a combination of a knitting story and not really a commission. I've been prepping for some retail making, which might contribute to my problem with balancing projects for myself and projects for others right now. But for now, this project is for me. So I've been working on some crochet mandalas, and I put mandalas in air quotes, as I'll talk about a little later. These are kind of multiple FOs / whips, though all the ones I have to show you are finished. So I'll show them in the order I made them. I made these two first with some acrylic yarns that I had in my stash. This magenta, you might recognize this magenta from my crop top that I crocheted. And these two they look different, but they're actually from the same pattern, along with this one, but this one is in a cotton yarn from Knit Picks Dishy in 3 different colors, the black, the gray, and the pink. These are all leftovers that I had. This yarn is actually they were leftovers from crop tops I was commissioned to make for other people. Anyway, so these 3 mandalas were from the Circles of the Sun pattern, which was originally a crochet along you would make 9 panels and sew them into a cushion. And I'll put the link to the patterns and everything in the show notes. I did not write down the authors' names, but I did write down write down the pattern names, and these are all free and available on the internet. And so I'll link to like the blog post or the file or wherever the pattern is. So before I show you the other mandalas, I've been having mixed feelings about the idea of crocheting mandalas, because mandalas in their original context are highly sacred symbols in Buddhist and Hindu religious practices. I I grew up Buddhist. I am not super involved in my faith or spirituality now, but I still identify as a Buddhist when I'm asked about my religion. And there's a lot of exchange between Buddhism and Hinduism. And actually, I did when growing up, the part of Buddhism I was in did actually use mandalas in our practices as kind of as meditation, as just devotional symbols. And the act of creating mandalas and the art of them is supposed to be a meditative practice because you're going around in a circle, you're drawing them or you're creating them in sand, and that provides a meditative aid. I think that crocheting and making mandalas, at least for the person making them, even if they aren't Buddhist, does respect that original use of mandalas. However, I think that selling them or creating just imagery because they're pretty is pretty appropriative. So to think about cultural appropriation, it is different from cultural exchange. It's different from sharing your culture. Cultural appropriation exists because of white imperialism from the past, where Europeans dominated other indigenous cultures, wiped them out, and then just forcibly took elements of their culture just because they were cool, they appealed to them. And to sell them for profit is, kind of participating in that history. And I know that I'm kind of making these for a kitchen store, not these specifically, but the ones I'll show you later, because I need the money, but I know that I'm participating in that appropriation, and it's probably, it's less problematic than like if someone was white and working from these crochet mandalas just because, oh my god, they're pretty, and oh, they're so spiritual and mystical, and contributing to that exotification of Asian cultures, especially South Asian cultures. This I'm doing because I need to pay the bills, but I get some uneasy feelings about it. Anyway, that was that little rant. Feel free to contribute your thoughts to it if you're made uncomfortable by this discussion, sit with it. Think about maybe why that's making you uncomfortable and lean into it. And I find that when you're in a place of discomfort, that's where great learning takes place. And, I'm definitely not perfect. I'm still learning. I don't know where I am in this project with my thoughts. And this, in addition to, being meditative and clearing my mind while I'm making these mandalas, I am also exercising my critical thinking and reflecting on, how does this add to my worldview, and how does this project help me grow and develop as a person and as a thinker. So back to showing actually made stuff. Okay, so in order, these are all made with Knit Picks Dishy, and I'm working with patterns that are okay to sell the final products of, so I might end up throwing these into the delivery when I give it to the store owner. So this is the Magic Spike Mandala, is a free pattern on a blog post. So again, links everywhere. The pattern's called Magic Spike Mandala, and this was a really fun pattern. So you start with all of these, you start in the center with a magic ring or a magic circle, magic loop. I don't know. I don't like saying magic loop because I'm a knitter and that has a different meaning in knitting jargon. So I started with the teal and then went to the gray and then the dark red, purple. I really like this color combination. All of the colors that I'm using are kind of darkish jewel tones, which are great for the summer rolling into the fall, which is probably when these are going to be sold. And this was really fun because I learned the spike stitch, which are these elongated stitches in this pattern. This is a nice size for, a trivet, a fancy dishcloth, a just something to put underneath maybe a pot or something to decorate. So that was the Magic Spike Mandala. This one is the Loopy Mandala. It's a little smaller. I really like the color combo in this one. So I just love this burgundy, but then the blue and the orange contrasting. I like that complementary color combo. And this is a lot more open and lacy, so probably less appropriate for use as something to grip with. But these are multi-use. It's good to have something nice and cottony and absorbent around the kitchen. And they're pretty enough to use as decoration too. So yeah, Loopy Mandala. Yes. And the last one is the Kaleidoscope Mandala. I messed up this one. This is supposed to, so if you count the sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 sections. The pattern was written for 6, which is probably why this looks a little cabbagey at the edges. Probably not going to throw this one in with the stock. But I also really like the color combo in this one. The pink, the green, the gray, and the blue. I think the white would have been a little too stark with this. So let me tell you about the color palette that I've been playing with these. So this also used spike stitches. There really weren't any new stitches in this one, though I'm still working on my tension with the spike stitches. And for all of these, I am using a 4.5 millimeter hook, nice and ergonomic grip. I noticed that my wrists click a lot when I'm crocheting, and this grip, this soft grip, is definitely helping with that. They don't hurt or anything, but I'm, just a little worried since I do have a family history of arthritis and hypermobility. That's probably not likely to show up for a while in me, but, I'll just do my best to take care of myself before it does, and be proactive about it. So yeah. The funny thing was, it didn't start waving until I got to this last kind of ring of color repeats. When I was just in, like, everything on the blue and inside, it was fine. It was laying flat. And then it just started getting cabbagey. And I think some people call it, like, potato chippy. And not in the fun way. Potato chippy is in, like, you have, like, rings. Well, like, how a potato chip, like, bends up and down. Anyway, so between these 3 mandalas, all of the colors that I'm using should be represented. Actually, between these 2, it should represent the color palette that I'm working with. So this green is Knit Picks. These are all Knit Picks Dishy. This is jalapeno. It's a nice bright green, but not too bright. It's, a nice medium green. Then this red is pomegranate. And this white, it's actually a warm kind of creamy white, is swan. The blue is kenai, and maybe this would show you it better. That it's a blue-green, that it's a teal, almost turquoise. Oh, I love it. It's so pretty. It's called kenai, kenai. The purple is mulberry, and the gray is silver. It's the gray and the white I bought as neutrals to really just pair with all of the colors. And the pink is begonia. So I have 6 colors and 2 neutrals to play around with, and I'm sticking with these 8 colors for kind of a large collection of dish towels, coasters, trivets, and stuff for the store. So these were the larger circles. I'm trying to come up with an alternate name for mandalas because they definitely count as mandalas while I'm making them and meditating while I'm making them. But selling them, I mean, I'm thinking of calling them kitchen blessings. Because while I'm taking care of myself while making them, and then I'm passing on that self-care and wishes for well-being to you or to the buyer when they buy them. And once and I'm trying out a variety of techniques while making these mandalas, which is why I followed patterns for the bigger ones, so that I can get a feel for the construction of a crochet mandala and see what and build my kind of stitch vocabulary and eventually just work my way up to working freeform. So I can make up my own stuff while making small coaster size ones like this. This one is, ooh, this one turned out nicely double-sided. Yeah, so this was with a spike stitch to create the elongated patterns. I've been playing around with some overlay techniques, so you see that I went in on this 4th round and overlaid a treble stitch on top in the front loop of a previous round. And same thing here. So yeah, just playing around with different crochet techniques to make beautiful little circular designs. And that was my last knitting story. So yeah, lots of stuff going on for me in my personal knitting. I'm gonna take a quick break and then I'll be back with commissions. This is going to be a much shorter section. So again, back to the whole thing about possibly overcommitting myself with projects. Like, I only have 2 projects to show, but I'm worried because I have more projects coming up and they're bigger projects that I'll kind of burn myself out and overwork myself, especially because I have the kitchen collection to work on. I have a pop-up shop that I want to do in the fall, which I all have to work ahead to make. And yeah, it's just going to take planning. But for now, let's stay in the moment. And I'll talk about my first commission project that I've been working on, and I'm having a ton of fun working on it because it's stranded color work, and I've ranted before about stranded color work. I'm not going to pull the yarn out. It's just off to the side there. So yeah, this is the helicase scarf so far. It is about 2 feet long, a little longer than 2 feet. And I am on the last chart. So, well, last as in it's the last to be read, but not the last to be worked. So we started from the bottom, now we here. And it represents strands of DNA. You start as a double helix, and DNA, to be really useful for anything, has to be split up and information is read from the inside. So here depicts the DNA strands splitting up from a double helix to single helices, the 2 halves kind of spiraling in tandem. And the single helix part is a lot more geometric and stylized because after all of these long floats, you're going to want something simpler and shorter, and involves a lot less catching floats. In fact, there is no catching long floats at all needed if you are comfortable with floats of 7 stitches, which I am. I know some people might not be, so I'm going to include a warning in there. Just that you should be ready, if you want to save yourself a lot of trouble on this pattern, which is my own design, by the way, you want to be comfortable with leaving 7 stitch long floats. So the yarn for this is Pancake and Lulu on 2 different fingering weight bases. One is twist fingering, which is this white or this off-white which she calls bone, in a merino bamboo blend. And then the black is actually, if you look closely, you can see a bit of the stellina. The black is the colorway charcoal, and it's on the sparkle fingering base, which is merino, nylon, and stellina. And the 2 yarns are matching really well, and I love the stitch definition and how crisp the color combination is, and that's showing off the stranded design so well. So I'm almost at the end of the skein of bone, the first skein. I have 2 skeins of each color, and because of the color distribution of the pattern, you can see you need a lot more of the background color than the foreground color. So I'm going to run out of the light color way before I run out of the dark. So that's going to be my limiting factor for the length of the scarf. Maybe I should have gotten 3 skeins of each, but I think 2 skeins of each, I can get maybe like 1 or 2 more repeats of this out of the first skein. And this is about how tall a repeat is, this straight part and then the kind of the bubble. And then I'm gonna start the second half of the scarf. So my plan for the scarf is to have both ends matching. However, you're working this end to end. So you start with the vertical stripes, which kind of also warms you up for stranded knitting. And then you work into gradually longer and longer floats until you're in a single helix chart. You split up. So this is about, okay, so this was like chart 1. About this was chart 2. Chart 2 can be repeated if you really love the double helix motif. This is chart 3, the splitting up, and then this is chart 4. And so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then for the second half of the scarf, you're going to have to, for the second end to match, you have to go 4, 3, 2, 1. However, you're not just working them in backwards order, you have to work the charts backwards too. So normally when you're working charts, you work from bottom to top, and then these charts, once you're going to the second end, you're going to have to do top to bottom. I'm going to send this pattern to a tech editor. I need to decide if I want to include the upside down versions of the charts as separate charts, because that's going to be a lot of work on my end to copy the charts, and also more paper if you print out the charts, and a bigger file size. But also I'm not sure how okay people are with being told to follow a chart upside down. So, or turn the chart upside down and follow it. So I need to talk extensively with a tech editor and more experienced designers for that. Because I think just for concision of the pattern, and that's what I've been writing for, concision, that would just be the simplest way to do it. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on working a chart upside down, let me know. I know people do it for, say, like flipping a sock from toe up to cuff down, or cuff down to toe up. But I don't know. Ugh. And the needles that I'm using are Knit Picks, are a US 2, which is, you know, a size above what I normally use for socks. This is fingering weight yarn, but I did want a fairly tight gauge just to, A, you have long floats, so you don't want them to show between stitches, and B, it just lends a really clean look to the stranded knitting. So that's it for the Helicase scarf. I'm so happy with how this is turning out right now. And then the next commission that I have is a needle adjacent project. I've been meaning to start it, and then I was like, oh wait, I'm podcasting today, might as well just not and wait for it so I can show you the yarn that I'm going to use. It's a needle adjacent project. So I'm going to be making a tapestry for a friend from college. She is in a much better paying job than I am. So thank you for your patronage. And it's a tapestry that's going to be fairly big, 7 to 6 feet across, 2 to 3 feet deep, or high, or tall. That's the word, tall. So about 7 to 6 feet by 2 to 3 feet. Width and length. And it's going to hang kind of as a centerpiece in her bedroom. So she had a specified color scheme, blue and green, because that's already the colors in her room. I was able to find a bunch of leftovers from previous projects, and let me show you. This is the bag that I'm keeping the yarn that I intend to use in. I have all the labels in there, pardon the mess. So you see it ranges from navy blues to a blue-green. This is actually, let me take this out. This is actually leftovers from from previous commissions. The shawls that I knit, Interlude and Rock Island, were both in this colorway of Tosh Merino Light, which is esoteric. Highly recommend this color. It is so flattering, and like it looks nice on my coloring. It would look great on anyone paler or darker than me. It's just such a flattering color for everyone that I've met so far. Just imagine me running up to someone on the street and be like, "Does this color suit you?" I also have some of this denim-y blue left over from my Cosette sweater, and a darker, like, gray blue left over from the Pizak scarf. And actually, I learned that's the right I learned that's the right pronunciation from the designer Jennifer Weissman, because I met her. She's coming to some knit group meetings now. And yeah, she kind of like pulled me over and was like, "Oh, by the way, the pattern is pronounced Pizak or Pizak." So, thanks for the correction. And then I have some white fun fur and some white sparkle yarn just to add some contrast. But I'm not just using yarn in this. The yarn all ranges from fingering weight to bulky to sport weight. I'm also going to be using some spinning fiber. And I'm not sure if I actually do want to spin this before knitting it. I might just roll it and twist it up by hand as I'm knitting it with super large needles. But this is bare superfine merino wool. It's so soft and squishy. I got 3 braids of this because it was a great deal. Someone was destashing, a fiber vendor was destashing it, and it's so soft and squishy. She had this great deal on 3 braids. I think I got 3 braids for like $20. Oh man, just feeling it on my face right now. So this is just 1 braid, 1 4-ounce braid, and I have 2 for myself. And then I have this braid, which is a thinner braid too, which will be great for knitting. It's alpaca fiber in blues and greens to all coordinate with that. And I'm using, when I was picking out the color palette, I was using this as a centerpiece and then seeing what leftovers and stash I had would fit the color scheme. So basically, yeah, blue, green. I'm thinking of gradients with pops of white for the tapestry, and it's probably going to be in like 3 panels. So the 2 side panels are going to be smaller and probably more coordinated, and the center panel, it might be like the center panel, let's say if it was blue to green gradient, the 2 side panels would be so blue to green in the center and then green to blue on the sides to create an mostly symmetrical piece. But I am so excited for this project. It's just going to be a big project, so I hope not to burn myself out. Whew. Okay, need to clean off my workspace a bit and also load some stuff onto my computer so that my phone doesn't run out of memory. It is past noon. I have work at 1. I need to get through the rest of this quick. So, update on spinning. The undyed bare BFL and fin sheep braids are now all spun up as part of my Sister Strands project with Mars. They're all skeined up and they're actually all sent to her. But I'll tell you the final yardages for the weights I got. So for the fin, I got 292 yards from the 4 ounces. And from the BFL, I got 232 yards from the 4 ounces. So both of those are about a light worsted or DK weight, which I was really happy with the yarn. So stuff that I do have to show you. Oh, I hope I'm not like tripping over my words since I'm trying to speak quickly. So I finished spinning up the buried turquoise skein, which you actually can't see a lot of turquoise. Well, there's a little bit there. There's a little bit there. So you have to hunt for it, which makes the name more appropriate. So this is 100% non-superwash merino. Do you like my homemade yarn labels, which are just from a a stationery note tied with some scrap yarn. Yeah. It is 100% non-superwash merino, and I got 166 yards from about 2.1 ounces or 51 grams. So I only had half the braid to spin, and half of a 4-ounce braid. And if I had the entire 4 ounces, I kind of wish I did, because then I could have gotten a good, 320 yards out of it, spun at the same consistency. And that would have been a nice sport weight yarn. Anyway, I'm super happy with how this turned out. This was fractal spun from, so I split the half braid that I have in half again, and I split one half into fourths. I spun the fourths end to end, and then the half from one end to one end. And so that color management creates shorter color repeats, breaks up the barber pulling, creates the barber pulling in a really appealing fashion. And apparently when it's knit up, it'll be a nice self-striping colorway. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I'm definitely going to keep it and knit it. Had a little tiny mini skein left over after I had plied the two halves. So I just plied it on itself. And then that's it for the Berry Turquoise project. So the next time you'll see it, it will be knitted up, hopefully. Next thing I have to show you is the dyed fin sheep braid from Mars. So now I'm working on the second half of my part of the project, spinning the dyed braids. And this is what I have so far for spinning up the fin sheep. So again, this is the same as the bear wool. It is from Misty Mountain Farms in Vermont. And what I did with her hand-dyed braid, they were hand-painted braids with kind of short color repeats. So I split them into fourths, and I'm spinning the fourths all end to end and plying the same end to same end. So that keeps the colors together, and but also kind of blends the colors. But the thing with the fin sheep versus the BFL, I'll talk about this more later. I really am short on time, and I won't have time to finish filming afterwards. Unless I film tomorrow. I might film tomorrow. Okay, so the colors are really blended out. You see some spots of red, but most of it is this nice golden brown. And what it reminds me of is whiskey and cherries. It's like the color of a good whiskey. So I think this skein is going to be called Whiskey and Cherries. So that's it so far. It's just a 2-ply yarn. I'm trying to keep it as close as possible to the undyed yarn, so we see how the final yarns turn out. And that's all I have on spinning. So quick section on acquired. So first thing is not yarn, but it is related to all of my stuff and growing myself as a knitter, a fiber artist, a designer. I got business cards. Look, they have my logo on the back. I made this logo myself. You have pipernell with cross knitting needles and a yarn. So this is the version. I made 2 versions of my card. One is for non-knitters, which is this, advertising my knitting commissions and some contact info of mine. And then I have the version for knitters, which advertises my designs, my podcast, and how to contact me. So I should just hold this up at the beginning of each episode so that people know how to contact me. Yeah, quick plug for where I got these cards from. I got them from moo.com, and I would highly, highly recommend them for any printing needs that you have. They're on the pricier side. They're pricier than Vistaprint, but these cards are just so nice, thick, and high quality, and they're so crisply printed that, like, look at that black on white. And the thing is, you can get custom backs. So these count as the backs of the cards, and you can get a different picture on the back of each of your cards. So that's really cool. So moo.com, highly recommend them. Oh, and they also come in this cute little box that's great for handing them out. The next acquisition I have is actually yarn. And oh man, I hate the speed podcasting. I just feel so frantic. So I went to the Wool and Vine Trunk Show at a store called Do You Knit. It's in Westfield, New Jersey, so it's about half an hour's drive from me. And so Kristen was there, the owner Karen was there. I got to meet them both. Kristen, it was my second time seeing her. I met her at Rhinebeck and I took a picture with her, and she remembered me, and I was like, ah, internally screaming, not externally, because I did not need any additional evidence that I'm crazy. And this is what I got. Look at it. Look at it. Oh my god. So I got 2 skeins from the trunk show. And the thing about this is really amusing to me. Do You Knit has a really developed aesthetic of neon and speckles, and they are like Stephen West in a store, basically. They've had Stephen West for, I think, a few times now. And they're really great at bringing in indie dyers. And I managed to walk into this store full of neons and speckles and bright colors, and I get my usual earth tones, muted colors, and so on. Personal aesthetic game strong. So the 2 skeins that I got, this is on her Blitz base, so it's 75/20 and 5 superwash merino nylon and gold stellina. Look at that stellina. And the colorway is dirty on purpose, and you have these nice speckles of brown, reddish brown, swirled with gray and cream, and oh man. I don't know what I'm going to do with these. I might make really nice socks out of both of them, and I'll probably get knee-highs, and that would be amazing, because if I make normal length socks, I only use like 50 grams because I have tiny feet. The second skein is on her footsie base, which is BFL and nylon, and it's on her, and it's the Outlander colorway. So you got blues, reds, blending into purples, you got natural spots. It's also so pretty. And I realized this is also in my red, purple, orange color scheme that I've seemed to be developing. Someday I'll make maybe something with all of these coordinating skeins. So anyway, that was the Wool and Vine trunk show. I drove there with some friends from the knitting group. And actually what happened was the trunk show started at 10. We got there around 11. She was already almost out. Like, Kristen almost didn't bring enough. Like, wow. So many people were there. It was honestly kind of chaotic. And especially in an enclosed space that I've never been in before, I was a bit like, ah. But it was good. It was all good. And it was a lot of fun. So I'm really glad I went. So I still have on my radar and life updates and a wrap up to record, but I am really out of time and I'm going to be late for work. So, and I need to eat lunch before. So I am going to record that at a later point, whenever that is. Okay, Chanel, deep breaths, deep breaths. It is a new day. I had to take like a day and a half break because of the work that I rushed off to, and yesterday was just too hectic and I got back too late to do anything. So it is now Friday, where I was recording last on Wednesday. So for the remainder of this episode, I just have on my radar and some life updates. So it's just on the chatty side. If you are, sorry, allergies too. Allergies today. So if you're just looking for the knitting eye candy and the craftiness, then that was really it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, like, blah, 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 and, enjoy the rest of your day. So on my radar, I have not done what I'm watching in terms of knitting podcasts for a while, and so I've been adding some new ones to my rotation, and just wanted to give them some shout outs. So let's see, let me start off first with Stitching the High Notes with Joanna and Creative Obsession with Carrie. And Joanna is one of my VKN buddies. She's super lovely on VKN, and so I've been trying to get more of my VKN podcasts in my rotation, just because I enjoy spending time with them talking live. And so it's like having that in my watch later queue in YouTube is like getting to spend extra time with them, but also sometimes I get exhausted socializing with people, so it's a good way to stay connected with friends and conserve my social energy at times because I have been, working more, and so I do need to conserve my energy more. And Joanna and Carrie I see this in common between their podcasts. Carrie of the Creative Obsession is a quilter and a dyer as well as a knitter, and so she shows this variety of crafts in her podcast. Joanna also shows a variety of crafts. She shows her cross stitching, her sewing. She's been making a lot of garments, which is awesome, and I feel like a lot of people lately have been. And I just don't have the equipment to sew, but it's just so inspiring seeing a different craft and what people are doing with it, what they're wearing, how they're fitting it to their style. So yeah, would recommend Stitching the High Notes with Joanna and The Creative Obsession with Carrie. And this will all be in the show notes. And so I always like my pair podcasts. I've been watching Wet Coast Wools with Glenda and Bernadette, and they are employees of Glenda is the owner, and Bernadette works there, of a yarn shop called Wet Coast Wools in the Vancouver, BC, Canada area. And yeah, they're just really fun to watch. So if I don't think anyone that I've mentioned watches this yet, but hi. And then people are going to smack me for not having this really in my rotation to begin with, but I've been watching the Fruity Knitting podcast by Andrea and Andrew, and I love their content, and they're very technical. They have great in-depth discussions and interviews with people in the knitting world, and so I just learn so much from each episode. So that was, again, Stitching the High Notes, The Creative Obsession, Wet Coast Wools, and the Fruity Knitting podcasts. And in my usual rotation, I've been watching Francophone Knits with Devin, the She's Crafty podcast with Kina, the Stranded podcast with Amy, and I feel like those three I watch because I just kind of they're solo podcasts. I get along with them in terms of personality. I mean, I haven't super talked to all of them personally, but I feel like, it's just like sitting with a friend and hanging out. And then I watched the Sockmentician podcast with Nathan Taylor. I feel like we'd get along. I don't know. And then Girls in the Yarn Cafe with Christy and Tristan. And then my friend Marcia's podcast, Very Little. So yeah, lots of knitting podcasts in my rotation as I'm working on commissions or on my own personal projects. But I do definitely try to have more headspace and bandwidth available when I'm listening to knitting podcasts versus a non-knitting audio podcast. So I put on like an audio podcast on iTunes that's non-knitting related when I need to just tune out and have something playing in the background. But I do actually like to listen more closely to knitting podcasts because I know I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to get inspiration for my projects, and maybe that's what I need to do more to kind of get out of this current slump that I'm in. But on that note, that would probably be a good time to do life updates. So some of you might have picked up on my Instagram feed and stuff. I have gotten back to working, day jobs outside of the home, not just my commissions and freelance tutoring. So I've actually started 2 new part-time jobs. One is at a place called the Creativity Caravan, which is a community art studio and workshop space and gallery. And my official title is a studio assistant. I'm also kind of an artist in resident, bringing my fiber art to the space in addition to the owner's word art and writing that they already have. So I'm going to be running workshops, mostly centered around beginners, because a lot of the point of this space is to be a space in the community that encourages people to try new media, try new ways of making and creating, and really nurturing that creative spirit that is present in everyone. So I might also lead more advanced knitting workshops, but I'll have to see what interest there is probably within the knitting group for that. And I have started working at a coffee shop. It's called Javalev. I think I mentioned it in my interview in TNNA, we went off on a little tangent with my friends when I was asking them about TNNA, and we mentioned that our knitting group has started meeting at one of the locations of this coffee shop. It's a local chain. They started in New York, and they've been starting stores in New Jersey. There are two in the town that I'm in, Montclair, and they roast their beans in upstate New York and bring it down here fresh. It's a really chill cafe, has a nice vibe, and really artsy too. So you go in and you'll see art by the baristas on the walls. You have chalk art everywhere. It's just cool. So if you're ever in the North New Jersey area, check out Java Love, one of the two locations. I've been switching back and forth between the two because I need to train at both locations and get a feel for the layout and also know how to use the equipment at each location, which, I mean, the equipment's going to be the same. We make the same drinks at both locations, but each piece of equipment has its own quirks that might be different from the drip machine at one, the drip brewer at one location might be a little tiny bit different than the other one at the second location. So yeah, that's been keeping me pretty busy. That's what I had to rush off to the other day, and yesterday I was also working there. It's kind of tiring, honestly. I'm learning that since I became more self-aware of my anxiety, I did have a restaurant job back in the day, like during high school. I just kind of like bus tables and stuff. It was not quite formal employment. I was under the table, but service jobs have really kind of agitate my anxiety. So I'm relearning how to cope with that and how to keep an even head while I'm working, or just be more self-aware of my own rising anxiety, or if I start spiraling. And that also, in general, being more self-aware during my shifts will just help, me be more present and actually do my job better. And multitask if I need to make a drink and take an order and ring them up, then just being more in the moment instead of lost in my own head will help me do my job. So on that note, that was work, and so play. I have gotten back into circus. I found a new aerial circus studio. They've only been around for 10-ish months. But, that was still after I moved, so I don't know why it took me so long for me to find them. But they are also in Montclair, Studio Air, and I've been taking hoop lessons for the past couple of weeks now. I'm so out of shape, but I'm getting back into shape. I'm getting my calluses again along my knuckles, and so yeah, that's just really fun. It is great to be exercising again. And I just feel like I'm already getting stronger and happier and more balanced. So again, things have been shaken up, but I think I'm getting back into it. And besides this weird crafting slump, I think overall I'm doing pretty well. I'm still figuring out my life. I don't know what I'm going to do long term, but in this moment I am, pretty okay. And that brings me to wrap up. I don't really have any last ending notes besides a reminder of everything we've been over. Enter the Pancake and Lulu giveaway before it ends on, actually, today's the last day of June, right? So you can enter right up until I have recorded the next episode. Just go for it. And then if you happen to not make it, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna kind of mark out your posts. Enter the spindle along that has been extended to August 16th, though there will still be a giveaway on July 16th because I'm a hobbit and I like giving stuff away on my birthday. Also on my birthday, there is a 2 at a time sock workshop that I am teaching at Frame and Fiber in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. So if you're in the area, definitely check it out. And yeah, just thanks for watching, everyone. If you are a new viewer, thanks so much for checking me out. Hope you liked it. If you're a returning viewer, I love you and thank you for your continuing support. I mean, I love you all, but I wanted to just acknowledge that, especially for returning viewers and for just continuing to support me as a person, as an artist, as a growing individual. So thank you so much again. This was the Pipernell podcast, and just stay tuned for the next episode whenever it happens. And I will see you again soon on social media. You can find me as Pipernell everywhere, and you should definitely give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the Ravelry group, follow me on Instagram, blah 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 blah, and so on. Alright, I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. I love you. Sorry, my door just opened right there. I don't have a poltergeist here. It's just the wind. Sorry, allergies.